What is up? Good evening, everybody. Thank you for spending it here with Marco and myself. Little 49ers talk on the table. You know, it's funny because when the schedule comes out, everybody rushes to go give their opinions on it. And I was no different. But then you have a day to sit on it, really think about it, look at the other teams in the division and their schedules, and you get to really pick it apart. What is going well for the 49ers? Maybe where could they struggle? And there's a lot to talk about with this schedule that's really outside of just the opponents themselves. So we're going to do that. We're also going to talk about the games that we plan on attending and teams that the 49ers must beat on this stretch for the 2024-2025 season. We're going to do all of that plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Thursday evening, which means I got my guy, Marco Martinez, in the building. What's up, Marco?
How's it going, man?
Fantastic, brother. I was just telling you backstage that I was watching the Tyson Jake Paul press conference. They've got a second one going on. I'm looking forward to that fight. Actually, the real fight on that card is the Serrano Katie Taylor 2 fight. That's the real fight. But yeah, man, things are going good. Sports outside of football are happening, and I'm excited, man. How are you doing?
Man, that fight's interesting because it's one of those ones where it's low-key a lose-lose situation for Jake Paul. I mean, if he gets knocked out by Mike Tyson, he lost to an old guy. If he whoops on Mike Tyson, he whooped on an old guy. Like, I thought it was a weird fight for him to take, especially after taking some professional boxers that he recently boxed. Weird. Hopefully Mike Tyson knocks him out, ends that YouTuber career's boxing stuff. I'm not too big on the YouTubers boxing, man. Like, I don't know. Like, honestly, should you and I go get in the ring too next? Like, kind of like what's going on? Like,
yeah, little 49ers content creator beef, so we can start a whole channel and get fights going on. Dean says you guys have a backstage. Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if it was you, Dean, that actually brought this up, but I had said this to start a show the other night. I think it was with Coach, and somebody was like, "What's backstage? Your living room?" It's like, no, I mean on the app itself. So the app that we use to go live, there's a backstage where we can talk to each other before and after the show. And you know, I'll let you in on an insider secret. You know, we sign off every show as if we're just going our separate ways. We stay backstage and we talk after the show. So there you go, insider secret. Now you guys know that when we act like we're signing off and not going to talk until whenever, we're actually talking about 13 seconds later. So there you go.
actually, Jesse's lying. Dean, don't let him lie to you. Backstage is when Jesse's getting his makeup touched up by his wife real quick, and then he jumps onto the show. Like, don't let him lie to you. He's over here being very calm and acting like we're in the backstage chilling and talking. His wife's touching up his makeup before he comes on. That's what it is.
There you go. Listen, you guys are already throwing out people that you'd love to see match up in the Niner community. If you guys want to have fun, you can throw that out there. It's definitely never going to happen, but since we're talking, you know, YouTuber boxing, might as well talk about that as well. All right, Marco, question for you. And I'm seeing this all over the place today. Just how unfair the 49ers schedule is. They face 4 teams coming off of a bye. I think it's the second Seattle matchup, Dallas, Buffalo, Kansas City. Those are the 4 teams they face coming off of a bye. And then they have the least, like the biggest discrepancy in rest compared to their opponents, like the third biggest, I think, since 2000. This is the second year in a row they have a massive discrepancy there as far as rest compared to their opponents. What do you think about this whole schedule being unfair situation for the San Francisco 49ers? You buy into that or no?
I mean, it is unfair. I mean, I guess if you're talking about rest, but why wasn't no one saying this last year? Like, we had a big rest. Like it was one of the top 10 in terms of games that were playing against teams with rest. Seattle is up there in the top teams for no rest this year. To be honest, like I'm not sure how I feel about it. Like when you look at it, yeah, it's harder when you're playing a team who has an extra day of rest. But also, if we really wanted 6 primetime games, that's what you get. Like, so it's either you pick your poison. Niner fans want to see Niners on the big stage more often than not. Well, if that's what you want, you're going to get less days of rest because that's the only way that they could fit you onto an extra Thursday night game or an extra Monday night game where you're getting less rest than a team. But also, too, you have the best team in the league. So how much does that really factor into things? How much does that matter? I think more so than rest for me, I think is being the 5th most traveled team per miles is more than the rest. That's where I'm like, well, if we're going to talk about a disadvantage, being in an airplane for the most miles constantly traveling back and forth, that is a bigger situation. Being in different time zones is worse than the 22 days of rest compared to last year. I believe it was 20 days. So there's no difference in those 2 days. No one talked about it last year. All of a sudden this year, it's a big deal because the Niners didn't win the Super Bowl last year. So they're going to talk about it as it being a major reason that they didn't win the Super Bowl. I just think it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it both ways. I definitely see how that can be a disadvantage to a certain extent. But then I also look at it and say, well, there's always something. You could be the Chargers, where they have, I think they travel almost 10,000 more miles than any other team in the NFL. They travel across, I believe, 8 more time zones than any other team in the NFL. Would you rather be that team? Would you rather be the Kansas City Chiefs, who play on every single day of the week this year? They have a Saturday game. They have a Friday game. They have a Thursday game. They have a Wednesday game, the Monday game. I think they play every single day this year except for Tuesday or something like that because there's no Tuesday games, whatever the day is. So there's always give and take that you have. Would you rather be a team that has a bye week in week 4 or week 5 and then have to thug it out through the rest of the season without your bye, or even waiting until week 14 to get a bye and go through 13 weeks of physical attrition before you even get rest? So I think that we live in a little bit of a silo. We look at our favorite team and we try to figure out what's unfair. It's the same thing with the Super Bowl. You know, people look at it and be like, oh my gosh, that game was called so unfairly. They wouldn't call a holding call. If they had done that, the 49ers would have just won. But I could easily turn on that game film and show you from the Chiefs' perspective and make the same argument. If you're just looking at it through the lens of a Chiefs fan, if they had lost that game, they could have turned around and said very similar things and made it look like or paint this picture as if the 49ers just had the refs on their side as well. So I think that looking through it through your favorite team's lens certainly can skew things. Yes, I do. I'm not going to act as if it makes no difference, because it does. When a team's coming off of a bye, especially when you're traveling to their stadium, I look at Buffalo in particular. I think that's a major disadvantage for the San Francisco 49ers. However, I think other teams going through their schedule also have major disadvantages at some point or another. You just got to deal with it, man. You have to find a way to push through. The 49ers were able to do just that last year. Let's see if they can do it again.
And I think that's, to me, that's the biggest thing is the time zones. Outside of the unjust schedule where you're playing teams on less rest, or the most teams where someone has a bye week, man, a lot of people were, before the schedule came out, the same people that are complaining are the same people that were like, any place, anywhere, anytime, Niners are going 17-0. And then all of a sudden the schedule comes out and it's like, wait, there's 22 days that less, like, it's like, bro, you guys are the same dudes who were the ones complaining or saying we can line it up and lace them up anywhere. So it's like, why are we complaining now? Like, it's all I hear is a bunch of excuses for if the 49ers don't win a game or the Niners don't win a Super Bowl. Man, every team has disadvantages, man. Throughout the season, you're going to have players on other teams where they have a kid, or a family member that's very close to them gets sick, and so those things matter too. So like, it's not going to be perfectly set where, you know what, everything's perfect throughout the season. Injuries happen. I mean, at the end of the day, we got 6 primetime games. Like, if anything, we should be excited to have 6 primetime games where you don't have to wake up super early when the Niners are on the East Coast or XYZ. So I'm not too worried about that, man. Just line them up. Niners have the best roster, top 5 roster in the league. So we shouldn't be really complaining about an extra days of rest. Like, truthfully, if that extra day of rest is the reason the Niners lose, then they weren't the better team, and they're also favored in every game. So not sure why that extra day of rest matters, to be honest with you.
Yeah, for sure. Dave says, "What's good, Jesse and the Marco?" The Marco, I like it. Is that like the Walmart? James says, "Bye week 9 is a big plus for me." I agree with that. I love the middle of the season bye week. That is a major advantage. 49ers Throwback says, "Don't forget what Steve Young said on KNBR about the Niners' chances blowing their Super Bowl." It's funny, 49ers Throwback, because I feel like, and I know I'm not the only one. I've heard other people say it too, but there's multiple people out here in the 49ers community that have been saying that all offseason. Like, listen, it's hard for me to pick them to win the Super Bowl coming off of a year where everything was just the easiest that it could have possibly been. In fact, Marco, you and I just said this 2 weeks ago. We literally just had that conversation. So it's nice that Steve Young's saying it. Obviously, people listen to a legend, as you should. It's Steve Young, the GOAT. He's my GOAT anyways, but he's not saying anything different than I think a lot of people have said. Last year was the easiest chance for them to win a Super Bowl based off of how down teams were across the NFC, how down the Chiefs were, and they weren't able to get it done. Now, does that mean they can't win a Super Bowl this year? No, it just means that the road to get there is going to be much harder than it was last year.
Absolutely. And you know, one thing I think about right now, as you're talking about the Steve Young stuff outside, I don't know why it just came to my mind. You know why? Also, I think a reason why we should blame Jed York and the ownership for the 49ers having those extra days of rest where they're playing teams with less rest. If you would have built your stadium in a better location where you had a dome and the weather wasn't a factor in terms of requesting each year, hey, if we're going to play early in the season, we want it to be a late game, or we want it to be the early Monday night game where we don't have the weather factor, so you have to start pushing games back. Well, if you want that to happen, the NFL has to, it's give or take, right? Like, okay, you want later games. Well, we're going to have to put you on Monday Night Football for week 1 because you haven't hosted a week 1 game in a while. We understand that it's hot, but now you have to host Monday night. So now you have that last day of rest. So, like, if we're going to be complaining, let's also put it on the ownership too. Like, hey, this is something you guys have requested. Now your team's getting a disadvantage, and now it's gonna be a reason for complaint. Like, hey, this is your doing because you built your stadium a certain way.
Yeah, talk about that, because I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that aspect of it. I think that's a very, very good point, one that I haven't heard. But yeah, it's what the direction, like how the sun hits you at a certain time and the way that stadium is built. Why don't you walk us through that a little bit?
So the way I don't know if so for fans who have been there or have not been there, the way the stadium is built, if you're on the away side, once the sun starts to settle during the 1 o'clock games, the sun's right in your face, is beaming on you throughout the entire time. So it starts to cook, starts to bake you, right? Like after being in the sun for 40 minutes straight, drinking alcohol, you start feeling it. You start getting sunburnt. You don't want to be there. The 49ers built their stadium without a dome, but they also couldn't build it with a dome because of the location. It's close to an airport. With the height requirements and everything of the building, it can't be a dome due to the reflection of the sun for airports and stuff like that, based off of the stuff I read. So it's, hey, you know what? Let's factor into all that. Like, that really could be a reason the Niners are playing with less days of rest, because the ownership and 49ers have asked, can you please not play us early in the season during the 1 o'clock games? If we play, have us be later in the season hosting games, or Monday night games count because it's not as hot. It's a later night game. Sunday Night Football, you're not going to get the schedule to be perfect for them, but the way they adjust it, I think that's also a factor into why the Niners are having less days of rest. And that could be the reason for the last 2 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's a really good point because the 49ers often start out on the road, like a road
Mhm.
trip. I remember in 2019, it was Tampa. And it seems like every year they started out on like this East Coast road trip type of deal. This is a big reason for that. The 49ers are requesting to not play at their stadium during the hot part of the day, essentially early on in the season, because they know this exists. That's their doing, so you can't have it both ways. You're asking for this, but then you're complaining about that. It's a very good point, Marco. I haven't heard anybody bring that up at all. And it's very true. Very true. Dazza says if we don't make it back to the Super Bowl, it won't be because of the schedule. Thank you. That's true.
Absolutely.
And then Dave says Dazza nailed it. All right. I agree with that. Okay. Let's talk about this. This is also interesting. So on one hand, you got people upset about this rest thing and how unfair it is that the 49ers are playing all these teams coming off of a bye. And then on the other hand, the odds makers have the 49ers as favorites in every single game this year. I believe this happened last year with the 49ers as well. And that was the first time in NFL history that had happened. Now, in back to back years, they're doing it again. What do you think about this? The 49ers being favorited in every game at this point during the preseason as they look at the schedule. If you were to bet on any game, the 49ers are going to be favorites.
I think it's weird because one, I don't get how the Niners are continue to be favored over the Kansas City Chiefs, man. Like since Mahomes has been there, I don't think we've beaten the Mahomes-led Kansas City Chiefs. One, two, when you go on the road for divisional rivals, you hardly see teams be favored. You're also playing a good Lions team. You're on the road in Green Bay and Buffalo. Like those are games where it's like favored. Like those are potentially games that you should not be favored because they're a playoff team with a great quarterback and you're on the road. So that's where I'm kind of confused in terms of why we're favored in every game. I understand that they have a great roster, but I don't think they're favorites in every game. I think it's more so the odds bettors understanding that, hey, you know what? They're a really good team. If we make them the favorites in every game, people are going to either bet on them or they're going to bet on the opposing team. Vegas is kind of trying to make sure they save money in a way. Like, come on, if we see the Niners are not favored against Minnesota, right? Like, you're going to mini. You know how many Niner fans would place a bet right now with hefty money on the Niners to beat Minnesota? So, like,
Oh yeah.
I think it's odd makers understanding, like, hey, you know what? The Niners are really damn good. Let's not mess around and make them favorites. And like, I don't know how to say his name. I'm gonna just go Terry Dome. He says you get 3
Arizona, yeah.
points for being at home. So every game the Niners should be at home. They should be favored. So that's automatically 9 games since they're hosting games. I just think it's weird that they're favored in every game.
Yeah, Terradome, I actually thought the same thing, and this used to be the case, but I was talking with I forget who it was online. This was like a year and a half ago because I had made a statement very similar, and they said that's actually no longer true. This is somebody who's an avid gambler. They said it's anywhere from 1.5 points to 3.5 points, depending on the team and home field advantage. So it actually does vary across teams, and I don't know what goes into that formula, how that works. Maybe the 49ers fall into that 3-point favorite zone, but that's not necessarily the case. Teams could be as little as get as little as 1.5 points for being a home team, which is interesting to me because I always heard it was just 3 points. That was the rule, but not necessarily the case anymore. But yeah, man, I think I agree with this. I mean, it really comes down to a whole betting situation where it's just easier to bet on the 49ers. The Chiefs one's interesting because the Chiefs we talk about complaining about the schedule. When I initially looked at the schedule, I was like, oh, the 49ers have a Thursday night game prior to this. They're going to have all the rest. This is a game that they're going to want to win. This should be, if you're going to beat the Chiefs, this is it. And then I found out later the Chiefs were coming off a bye. I was like, all right, well, maybe so much for the whole rest thing. You would think that the team that is the defending champs that does beat the 49ers every time they play them would be the favorites. Although I'm not necessarily picking the Chiefs to win that game It's just hard for me to understand how that's possible. And I look at other games as well. I know the Buffalo Bills on paper aren't as good as the 49ers. I would agree with that in a vacuum. Neutral field or in San Francisco or Santa Clara, I would definitely pick the 49ers. But it's a road game in December, team coming off of a bye after being in Green Bay the week before. I feel like the Bills should probably be favored in that game as well. Not that they're guaranteed to win, but if I'm just looking at it from a betting standpoint, I think I would lay my money on the Bills, especially if they're getting a few points. So I found that one really interesting as well.
Yeah, especially because you're playing the Bills and Packers during the cold season. Like if you're getting a snow game, I think it heavily favors the Packers and the Bills because they have the quarterback with a stronger arm. And when you do get into those kind of those games, it comes down to who can run the ball and who has a stronger arm as a quarterback, who could knife through the wind and in that cold environment. And that leads to Josh Allen and Jordan Love being favored for me. But I mean, I think the Niners schedule is pretty solid, man. Like you should start off the season hot. You're playing Minnesota, New England, Arizona. Like those are pretty winnable games. New York is a very winnable game. You don't really know what they're going to be. So essentially, they're looking at it. You should start off pretty hot. It's later in the year when you're having to go to your place at home versus Seattle, and then you're on the road for 2 weeks for Green Bay, Buffalo. Then you have I guess what you would call, a easier game with Chicago, and then you end out with the 3 straight. I think from week 10 on, it's a pretty tough schedule. Like essentially, but it's like everyone's schedule is going to get tough. I saw who was it? There was 2 teams who they play. Might be Baltimore. Someone in the AFC, like in that division, they play 6 of their last 8 games are divisional opponents, and like that's rough, man. That's very rough. So like we want to complain about not playing or playing so many with less rest. I would not want to play our divisional opponents that many times in a short period because that means you're back to back playing each other.
Ugh. It has everything to do with it. Let me put it to you like this, 49ers all day. When the Miami Dolphins were going to play the Kansas City Chiefs and it was frigid weather, what was the lead up to that whole game? It was talking about Tua and his arm and can it cut through the weather, right? That was the whole conversation leading up to that game. That's why a lot of people were in on Kansas City. I mean, obviously for other reasons, but people were like, listen, Tua's arm doesn't travel in the cold weather. And if it's supposed to snow on top of that, we don't believe he can get it done. Then the very next week, you had Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes. Guess how many people talked about the weather, which was actually supposed to be worse? 0. You know why? Because nobody's concerned about their arm cutting through any inclement weather. So those things definitely matter. You start to get interesting weather, cold weather, the ball gets, extra inflated. It's harder to throw. You get some moisture in the air. We've seen that with Brock Purdy. Moisture certainly has affected him thus far in his career. Yeah, I mean, a strong arm being able to carry. Joe Montana was a good example of this. They lost, I think it was the AFC Championship, and he talked about how his arm wasn't strong enough to cut through the wind that day. He just couldn't do it. So, arm strength matters when you've got crazy weather. And if it's going to be extremely cold and there's moisture in the air, give me a strong arm in that particular environment every day of the week. So.
And the team I was actually talking about is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They play out of there they don't play a divisional opponent until week 11. And then from week 11 to 18, it's 6 of their divisional opponents. That's rough.
Yeah, that's extremely rough. Oh man, we'll see if they can end with a winning record. They've actually got a pretty good team, but man, that's not going to be easy at all. That division too, AFC North, gauntlet for everybody. Whoever comes out of there might be a 10-win team, and it's going to be brutal for them. Absolutely brutal. All right, let's talk about this schedule a little bit and games that you look across and you say early on, hey, this is a game or a team that the 49ers have to find a way to win. Give me a game. I'll give you a game. We'll go back and forth till we run out of games.
I mean, I think the most obvious one, and I think it's gonna be Kansas City for me. Like it's,
Mm.
I feel like if you, a lot of Niner fans like to say, "Oh, it's a rivalry between us and Kansas City," but I don't see it as a rivalry. Like we have not beat them. You can't consider something a rivalry if both teams have not won, and Niners have not won. So
That's
if
like
you,
saying the 49ers and Cowboys are a rivalry. Yeah, it is based off of what it was in the 80s and 90s, but today's teams, it's not a rivalry. Dallas can't beat the 49ers.
so for me, I think ownage is ownage, and I think you got to prove in the regular season that you know what, hey, even though it's just regular season, we can beat this team. Like it's once you get into the playoffs, you got to have that mentality. Hey, we already did it once, let's do it again. If you lose to them one more time, it's gonna be like, damn, we're never gonna be able to beat this team. Just like when the Niners play the Cowboys, right? You could kind of see, even though the Cowboys players talk about it, and they talk at the podium like they have this energy, or we're gonna come out to show them. It's fake. It's all that. That's rah rah. Like it's fake, right? We know it. You can see right through it. So if you can't beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season at home, then I don't know when you'll ever be able to beat Mahomes and the Chiefs. I think that's for me, that's just the biggest must-win game of the year.
It's definitely a must win from a psychological standpoint. But let me ask you this. This is what's interesting about that game. Psychologically, that game means everything for the 49ers because if they can't beat Kansas City and then they do have to play them in a Super Bowl, I don't know how that team can be confident they're going to win that game. That being said, if they do win that game, maybe that gives them a boost psychologically. I don't think it does anything psychologically to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think their confidence in beating the 49ers remains steadfast no matter what. The Bills seemingly almost always beat the Chiefs during the regular season. You know how much that's mattered in the postseason? None. Absolutely none. They've beat the Bills 3 straight times in the playoffs, yet can't seem to beat them in the regular season as of late. It doesn't matter. Kansas City's like one of those teams where they're just better. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. And it's the same thing I said about Dallas and San Francisco last year, where to me, Dallas had to beat San Francisco. If they wanted any shot at playing the 49ers in the playoffs and beating them, they would have to beat them in the regular season. The flip side of that was even if they had beaten the 49ers, I still think the 49ers would have had the utmost confidence and probably beat them in the playoffs anyways. So that's kind of the way that I look at this Kansas City Chiefs team. From the 49ers side of things, it means everything. For Kansas City, it's like, okay, I mean, beat us in the regular season. It means nothing if we face off in a Super Bowl. So
What it
that's what
might
I
do
find
too,
interesting
though,
about that game.
actually, it might be beneficial for Kansas City to lose. To be honest with
Mm.
you, like the Niners have not beat them. How would you? What is the blueprint for the Niners to beat the Chiefs? Right? Like if Andy Reid gets that blueprint, and he's like, okay, this is probably what they're going to try to do to us again. We're going to expect this. We're going to change things around. So I think it would be beneficial for Kansas City to lose in a way, not necessarily saying like, oh, who cares if Kansas City loses, right? Like if you're looking at the game, but sometimes losing is kind of important to certain teams. And that's why I think Josh Allen and the Bills can't get past Mahomes and the Chiefs. They understand what the Bills defense wants to do to them. They understand what Josh Allen and that offense wants to do. They game plan for it and they change things how they're supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's worst nightmare says, Jesse's still waiting to hear your elite QB list from last year. Didn't we just do a QB list last time we were on the show?
I think so.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, man. I've done the QB list thing multiple times, but maybe you missed it. Go check last week's show.
I think he's just trying to say because he continued commenting saying that you said Brock was an elite. So he's saying stop ducking that comment.
Said Brock wasn't elite, so I'd like to hear you think is stop ducking. I've given you my elite quarterbacks. It's a list of 7. I'll do it one more time just for you. You ready? Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson. This is in no order, by the way. Justin Herbert, Stafford. That's actually probably the 6. And then I think Stroud's probably right there, but I need to see it more. So those are my 6. And then I think Stroud's like right there, ready to go. So did I miss somebody? I hate doing lists off the top of my head. Maybe I missed somebody too.
Yeah, probably. I'm not on top of my head. I have to write stuff down I have to see, make sure I'm making like a note and stuff.
Yeah. Anyways, that's there you go, bud. Hopefully you got it. If not, you can watch
He
last
was
week.
gonna make that comment. I knew he was gonna make the Stafford is elite comment, bro.
What
People
was it?
sleep on Stafford, man. They really sleep on Stafford.
He is elite. I don't know. I'm not really sure how he's not. Do you think Purdy's better than Stafford? Let me ask you that. Is Purdy better than Stafford? I'm curious to see.
I mean, the Niners would have won a Super Bowl. Niners would have already had at least one Super Bowl if they had Stafford.
Just saying. All right. Okay. There's a lot of fun games this year. A lot of primetime games. I think a lot of really fun matchups. I got to be honest with you. It's tough because pretty much bank on the 49ers making the playoffs. And I want to go to playoff games as much as possible as well. Being at the NFC Championship last year was absolutely incredible, especially the way the game played out. Really couldn't have wished for a better atmosphere, a better outcome. Really enjoyed my time with David. That being said, I can't not go to games. And there's a lot of intriguing games this year. What games pique your interest the most? What games do you want to attend this year?
I know one of the games that I'm trying to attend probably won't happen because it is my anniversary or my 1 year anniversary. Is the Buffalo Bills game on December 1st. I'm trying to convince my wife, like, you know what, we'll go to upstate New York. We'll have a great time in New York. We'll go to the Buffalo Bills game. But she was like, Buffalo's going to be freezing in December. But then she hit me with the Buffalo's going to be freezing. But then she said, you know what? Game looks good on the schedule. Green Bay on November 24th. I'm like, what's the difference? It's freezing cold.
A week difference, yeah.
A week difference. They're both going to be cold. But those are the two games right now that I'm looking at. I do want to make it down to Los Angeles for my birthday week after seeing the schedule. That is my birthday. That September 22nd game. So I'm looking at that one. I'm like, hey, you know what? I did have plans to go to Seattle for my birthday. Might be changing it to that Orange County area. Check out the Rams Stadium or the Levi South since it is on my birthday. But kind of just taking a look at things and looking at it. I think those are the games I want to go to or at least try. But man, I'm not that big of spending money on games. I feel like I'm more comfortable watching games from home.
Yeah, I can't necessarily argue with that. You know, it's interesting because I love being at the games, but I immediately get like not stressed, but a little flustered that I can't have my traditional post game show. Now I gotta like do it in the stadium. I gotta pre-record it. You got the music playing in the background. You got to worry about that because you'll get copyright infringements, and it's just super annoying. It's just not the normal flow to where it's like during the game when I'm at home, like I'm taking notes of what happened, and then I've got my topics ready to go for a post game and all of that. When I'm at the stadium, I've got to like quickly think on my feet. I got a few minutes to knock this out. I've usually got somebody with me, so they're waiting on me. It's super weird. I don't know. I don't like not being in my element. Yeah, it's super awkward. And then yeah, you're recording yourself or somebody's recording you in the middle of a stadium. People are watching you. It's just, I don't know. It's different. I don't like it as much. The vibes aren't the same. I like to vibe out with the 49er fans, good or bad, after the game. It's kind of like my therapy, but this is a one-way street. I upload the video. There you go. And usually my phone's dying, and so the upload's taking forever. I don't know. It's super. Just thinking about it's got me angry because I already know how this whole thing's going to go. Not only that, but I got to carry all my stuff into the stadium just to make this work. Not a big fan of it, but I digress because I am going to attend multiple games this year. I initially wanted to see the Kansas City Chiefs game. I wanted to see the Buffalo Bills game. And then I wanted to see the Tampa Bay Bucks game. But last night, the way the schedule fell, had to make sure my son's in bed. The way the schedule fell, he's a Ravens fan. They're also playing here at Raymond James Stadium. Well, they're playing on Monday night, the day after the 49ers and Chiefs game. So there's no way I'm going all the way out to Santa Clara, and then flying home early Monday to make a night game on Monday night to take my son for his birthday present to the Ravens Bucks game. So I had to scrap that game, luckily my guy Sunil came through. He's like, "Hey, what games are you planning on going through?" And I told him, and then he goes, "Well, how about coming to SoFi?" He's like, "I just got 2 tickets. Stadium's not far from where I live. You can come stay with me. You just buy this other ticket off me. We're ready to go." So last night I booked my flight.
Wait,
Bought
you're
the
going to
other
be at the
ticket
Rams
off him.
game?
I'm going to be at the Rams game.
That
Yeah, I'm going to be there.
that makes him a little more intriguing to show up to see some of the guys. So that'd be, I mean, it is my birthday, so I'm going to have to talk to my wife. Like, you know what? Instead of Seattle, because I was actually talking to her. I want to go to Seattle for my birthday, but then the schedule fell. I'm like, you know what? We're actually playing in LA. It's not that bad of a game.
Yeah, I will say SoFi is a lot more expensive than most stadiums. Booking them versus booking here at Raymond James, the price is insane, especially where you can sit. But it's an experience. SoFi is a very nice stadium from what I understand. And then, there's some people that are Rams fans that have tuned in here and are offering to host myself for a tailgate and whoever I'm with. So I'm excited for that. Looking forward to that. So I'll be at SoFi. I also bought my ticket for the Bucks 49ers game and then the Bucks Ravens game for my son. And then I'm waiting for my guy from the NFC West Roundtable, Dan. He and I are going to be going to the Buffalo Bills game. He's a Bills fan, so we plan on booking that together. He's got to wait another week or so because he bought a bunch of tickets last night and just needs to make sure he gets his money up. So I understand it. So we're gonna hang tight on that, but we should be buying tickets for that as well. So I'll say this: anybody that's going to be at SoFi, anybody that plans on seeing the Buffalo Bills game or going to be here in Tampa, those are the 3 games I'll be at. So definitely you can hit me up. You can email me. You can DM me. If you'd like to meet up, that would be cool. I'd love to see anybody there.
As we're speaking, I'm looking for tickets at SoFi right now because it's my birthday. So technically, like, I probably wouldn't be paying for them. This is my birthday. You know what I'm saying? So it's definitely going to be one of the ones I'm excited about now. I'll be on my credit card, but
I know. D says, Jesse, if I remember correctly, we win when you're at games. So can you go to all of them? I wish, man. Yeah, undefeated in the Shanahan era. I think I'm like 7 or 8-0. I'd have to go back and look at the schedule, but undefeated in the Shanahan era. So maybe that's 3 wins that you can count on, which is interesting because 2 of the games I'm attending, I actually have down as losses for the 49ers preseason here when I look at the schedule. So maybe they will end up being wins because I am there. So there you go.
Do you believe in stuff like that? Like, are you into like those superstitions where, like, oh, if I'm there, we win?
No. I think it's funny to look at it.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm definitely not that important. Not that important. Yeah, the reason I wouldn't take Aaron Rodgers in that conversation is because I don't know what he is coming off of that injury. I mean, if I can guarantee he's Aaron Rodgers, of course he would be in that elite conversation. I would take him over Stafford. But coming off of an Achilles injury at 40 on a new team, I mean, are you have that much confidence he's just going to come in and be elite? I don't.
I mean, there's a chance, but it's like the injury is the reason why he's not in there. So it's like, I get it.
Yeah, it just, I don't know.
And also, his last year fully healthy, he wasn't that good.
No, he wasn't. But some of that I do attribute to a lot of what Jordan Love went through last year, where it was a lot of growing pains with the younger players. And I think that he was going through that. I also think that was a big reason why the Packers and he kind of decided like it's probably time to move on. He didn't want to go through the growing pains or perceived growing pains. You saw Jordan Love and that team go through those growing pains and they finally hit their stride and it looked really good. That's what they were going through the year prior. So I think some of that, remember they had traded Devontae Adams and they had a bunch of young receivers. They were trying to figure it out. So I think some of it's that. I don't know how much of that is Aaron Rodgers, how much of that is growing pains. But what I do know is he's in a whole new team. He still hasn't played a full game with this team yet. He hasn't even played a quarter with this team yet. And he's coming off of a major injury at nearly 40 years old. I don't know, man. I can't say that guy's still elite. Now, if we're just looking at careers, yes, Aaron Rodgers is truly elite, but I don't know that he is that anymore.
This guy's really your worst nightmare.
Why is that?
Oh, he's his name. Everyone's worst nightmare.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
It's just a random name.
It's really pretty easy. I mean, you don't have to keep receipts. Like the videos always stay up. So there's not really much that you can't find. But it's interesting, and we talked about it last week. It's like everybody keeps receipts on the perceived negative, but nobody wants to keep the receipts on the things that somebody was right on. That's an interesting dynamic, but I digress. Roger says, thank y'all for showing love to Stafford. See you at SoFi, Jesse. There you go. There's a Rams fan as we speak. What's up, Rogers? Yeah, man. I don't know. I just don't know how you can look at Stafford and think that he's not a really damn good quarterback. He's always pushed down these lists. It's never made sense to me. He does his thing, and he's tough as nails. He's always put up big time numbers. Literally the moment that he left Detroit, he wins a Super Bowl. Last year, that nobody thought that team was going to be what it was. Nobody. He was missing his best receiver to start that season out. And dude, they were way better than they were supposed to be. And I think a big reason for that is Matthew Stafford. And watching what he did, I mean, he was literally, I don't know how he didn't get into a concussion protocol against the Lions, but he was knocked out cold and still somehow came through and was throwing darts all over the field. Dude's an absolute gamer. You look at the physical skill sets. I mean, there's not a throw that he can't make. I don't know, man. Matthew Stafford's a G to me. I don't know how anybody can look at him and think that's not elite caliber quarterback, but what can you do? Cryptic says last year, early predictions were Niners versus Jets Super Bowl, only week 1, but will be a good matchup. And honestly, probably only game both teams will be 100%. Yeah, we'll see how the preseason goes. I'll ask you about the Jets. Are you buying the Jets brand? Because I'm not.
I'm not buying it as much as the NFL is shoving it down people's throats, right?
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be a really good team, man. Like, even if Aaron Rodgers is 70% of Aaron Rodgers, Breece Hall is a really, really, really good running back. I think he's probably a top 5 running back in the league. They have a top 5 defense. So as long as Rodgers can be better than Zach Wilson, and who else was their quarterback last year? I don't even know their other quarterbacks' names. Joe Flacco, maybe? No, Joe Flacco's with the Browns.
No, Browns.
So it's like, as long as he can be better than Zach Wilson, they're going to win games. Because their issue was their offense sucked.
Yeah, their offense was bad. Here's the problem I have. They went out and got a bunch of guys that are big names that have been injured. And now you're expecting this team that has a bunch of question marks from an injury standpoint to play multiple games on that turf, which is known to snatch ankles and knees and Achilles, apparently. I don't know how you can expect that team to make it through their schedule and be relatively healthy. Talk about travel early on. They're playing on short weeks. They play in Germany. There's a lot of things on that schedule early on to make those primetime games that they have, because the NFL is trying to milk the Aaron Rodgers situation just in case he's not able to make it through a full season. They got to put all those primetime games early on for him. And so that's causing a lot of interesting things. I don't know. I think on paper, very, very good team. You've also got the Nathaniel Hackett situation where they presumably tried to replace him on the fly without him knowing he'd still be a part of the team, but really he's not calling plays. That I don't know what's going on there. You've got Saleh fighting for his job. I have to see it to believe it with the Jets. Again, very good roster on paper. I'm not buying the brand, but we'll see.
Honestly, I do think NFL is stupid in terms of you're having teams go to Germany, Brazil. That should be week 1, bro. Like, there's no way that needs to be week 1 on whether it's a Saturday or Friday night. They get the weekend to fly back, and then they get to be able to get those extra rest days. Having it where they're week 6 after a Sunday, you fly out to Germany, and you play that next Sunday, and then you fly back and you play on the next Monday. Like, that just it's so ridiculous. Like, NFL talks about player safety. It's like that's the stuff. Like, when Niner fans are like, "Oh, well, we're playing on 22 less rest." I would much rather play on 22 days of less rest than have to do that, because that's going to affect them not only for that week and the next week, but probably for another week and a half. So that's 3 games that it's affecting. So, I'd much rather have 22 days less of rest.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it with the Buffalo Bills last year. They hit this mid-season skid, but really it was tailored around that game, and I forget where they played last year. It was against the Jaguars, but they lost that game, and then they were lackadaisical for another 2 or 3 weeks after. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a lot of jet lag. So, yeah, it's I don't want any international games at all. At all.
Yeah,
And the other thing too is the 49ers have avoided Hard Knocks as well, which is a pain in the ass. So, I
and
mean,
they said
we
who's on
talk
Hard
about
Knocks this year?
schedule, but Giants, I believe, are on Hard Knocks. Yeah.
I thought Giants were I thought it was the off season one only. They haven't. I don't. I thought it was they haven't done
Oh,
full.
is there I didn't know there was an off-season one. Wait, they're doing an
Yeah,
off-season one,
yeah, just off
a
season.
training camp one, and then they're doing an in-season division, I think.
Yeah,
Dude, oh my
I want to
gosh.
say the Giants is just off season, so it's going to talk about
Okay.
like it'll be around like they off season move, their draft and stuff like that. So probably focusing on like the Saquon Barkley stuff, their drafting Malik Neighbors and stuff like that. I don't think they're the full season or training camp one yet.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I didn't realize that they had this whole third one that they were adding. And then I think the in season one is a division this year. It's not just a team from what I had read. Maybe
Yeah,
I
I thought there was an in division one.
Yeah. I don't know. Either way, I love the access, but it is kind of crazy when you think about how much they're putting the camera on these poor guys. Dazza says, which bad teams from the AFC and NFC do you see having a big improvement and potentially making the playoffs? There's
Great
always
question.
one of these teams. There's always one of these teams. Is it a cop out to say the Bengals? Just because they were technically a bad team, but it was because of Burrow last year. I feel like that's a cop out, right?
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, the question's a question, right? Which bad team? Like they were a bad team. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go on Colts. I think Colts make the playoffs.
Oh, okay.
I think they'll be the
Interesting.
last team, and the last team will be the seventh seed in the division or in their conference.
Wow. Bad team to make the playoffs. I mean, like I said, I think Bengals are low hanging fruit. Although I don't know they'll necessarily make it either. The AFC North's a gauntlet, but the AFC is so tough. I mean, there's just not going to be teams sneaking into that thing. You know what I mean? So I'll go with the Bengals there. What about the NFC team?
NFC is gonna be surprising, but I think the Bears make the playoffs, bro. 7-10 last year. 7-10 last year. Their offense is pretty stacked in terms of as long as you could get production from it. They have a good defensive coordinator. 7-10 last year with a shitty team is pretty good. Like that's so it's
Yeah, it's
maybe
interesting because
Falcons.
yeah, Falcons might be the team. It's interesting because when you look at it, you look at the NFC West, for example, the two teams that made the playoffs were the Rams and the 49ers. Well, I think they're clearly the two best teams in the division. So then I go to the NFC East. The two teams that made the playoffs were Dallas and Philly. I still think they're clearly the two best teams in that division. So it's hard to pick another team there. There's only going to be one team likely coming out of the South. Last year it was Tampa. Maybe the Falcons have overtaken them, but I would still probably bet on Tampa. And then you got Green Bay and Detroit that came out of the North. I think those are still the two best teams. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if there is a surprise team. I could see the exact same teams in different order making the playoffs this year. That's likely not going to happen, but it's hard to bet against it. Chicago, yeah, I don't know. They're kind of like the Jets to me, where I don't know if I'm buying their brand, and I think a lot of people are hyped about them, and deservedly so. If Caleb Williams is really, really good, then certainly they could make that leap. But I don't know.
And
I don't
then
know if there is. I can't pick a surprise team in the NFC. I really don't see one.
because when you look at for me when I look at Chicago Bears, right? They're 7-10 last year. Their team
Mhm.
got better this year, I think. They were
Yeah,
also
I
pretty
agree.
young. So it's like when you do get better, you are still young. Um, there's a good chance you make the playoffs. They start the season off at Tennessee, Colts, Carolina, Jacksonville, like a lot of winnable games. But their
Yeah.
biggest issue is they have a week 7 bye, and they go on a long stretch against some really good teams. They play Detroit, Niners, Detroit twice, Minnesota twice, Green Bay twice.
Packers probably twice. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like man, that's kind of hard when you have to play a lot of divisional rivals towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
But they have a solid squad. I think Caleb Williams is going to be just fine. I don't think he's going to be elite year one or great year one. I think he's going to be just fine with all the weapons he has. If he's not, there's major concerns.
Be a red flag, yeah. That's the other thing though too is I look at Detroit, who won the division. I think they're a better team on paper, much better team actually on paper than they were last year, and even Green Bay's a better team on paper. So yeah, certainly Chicago did improve, but is it enough to close the gap on those two teams? And if it's not, do you see a third team making it out of the North? I don't see either of those things happening. So injuries will happen, and I'm sure there's going to be a team, but just on paper, looking at how the offseason played, I wish I could answer your question better, Dazza, but I don't have a team in the NFC. So
The NFC's hard. I'm just throwing Chicago out there just because they got Caleb, man. I don't think they make the playoffs. That's the only reason why I put them out there because they got Caleb.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is going to be a fun one. I think CJ Stroud versus Jordan Love is going to be fun. CJ Stroud's certainly the better player. I forget where that game's at, but I think when I was going through the schedule, I had the Texans winning that game. So I will go with the Texans. Texans to me, man, they're a really, really good team, at least on paper. All right, a lot of people have done the schedule predictions for the 49ers, and we're going to do that. But instead of going through game by game, let's just talk about all of the teams. I actually went through not only the NFC West, but I also added in the Eagles, the Packers, and the Lions into my schedule kind of analysis to see how I think the NFC is going to shape up. And I'll tell you this, I could see 5 teams having a legit chance to win at least 11 games, which is not something I could have said last year going into the season. And that means that it's going to be very tough for the 49ers to get the number 1 seed like they had last year as well. That being said, let's start at the bottom of the division. I would assume that we probably both have the Cardinals finishing last. What do you think about the Cardinals? What record are you kind of putting on them loosely before this season were to start?
Ah, man, with the Cardinals, I don't see them winning 7 games. Like 7's the top.
I'm
Like
with
when you look
you.
at it, the winnable games: Washington, the Chargers, Chicago, New England, Carolina, and then like Minnesota. But then there's like a couple of toss-up games. Like, hey, they're gonna win because they have talent. Like 7's the max I see Arizona winning. And hey, who knows? Kyler may be able to carry this roster, but it's also a bad coaching staff, in my opinion.
I think they're a year away from being able to truly compete. They got a ton of good draft picks again next year. And I think they're going to have a ton of money free up as well. They're going to have a lot of money to spend next offseason. So I think next year they're actually going to be an interesting team. But I think they're a year away from that. I actually have them finishing 6-11 this year. So I've got them at 6 wins. I don't know what the over-under is for them betting-wise. I'd be curious to see. But I have them at six wins. And I struggled to get there. Honestly, when I was going through their actual schedule, I struggled to get there. And here's the other thing that I had to do as I was going through these schedules. I started with the Niners and then worked through the NFC West. Well, some of these teams overlap, so I had to make sure that I was being consistent, right? It's easy to like look at a schedule and just quickly go through and pick wins and losses, but that means that it has to match up when you're going through the other team's schedule if those two teams play. So if you had the 49ers beating Detroit, then that means you have to make sure that Detroit loses to the 49ers. You go through the schedule over there. And there was a lot of overlap as you went through it. So yeah, I had the Cardinals finishing 6-10. Who do you have finishing 3rd in the division? Seahawks?
I have Seattle. I think, but what's crazy is when I look at Seattle's schedule, there's 9 winnable games. Like,
Yeah.
right away, I'm looking at, I'm like, dang, like 3rd seed is going to be 3rd place in the division is going to be 9 games. Like that's at least winnable for them. Toss ups, they could potentially win 10-11. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. They've got things actually shape out pretty good for them. I went through it and I have them finishing 10-7, which is, I mean, if there's a team that's going to send 3 to the playoffs, maybe there we go. Maybe that's my answer. Seattle Seahawks. But they weren't bad last year. They were like a game away from making the playoffs. So I don't know. That one's tough. But I could see Seattle winning 10 games and making the playoffs. In fact, as I went through their schedule, I do have them winning 10 games. So there you go. All right. Who do you have finishing number 2 in this division?
I actually have the Rams.
Okay.
And it's close. It's close. It's not. I think that's going to be the deciding factors when we play the Rams on who finishes first. But I think the Rams have at least, and this is just me just going, I'm not like breaking down like, okay, who do they play when? What do the teams play before XYZ? Their early bye week does screw them with bye week at week 6. But I think there's 11 winnable games there. I think they sweep Arizona. I think they sweep Seattle. I think they coin toss one with the Niners. And then outside of that, like there's a lot of winnable games there. The Rams are really, really good because I like what the Rams did, right? You stack your offensive line interior wise. Jackson is a sleeper of an offensive tackle. Had a really good year last year. Really good weapons, really good run game. Defensive wise, I think they should be fine. I don't think they're going to have a major drop off without Aaron Donald. So they're going to be a playoff team again. And quarterback wise, they have an elite quarterback. So when you have an elite quarterback, that's the biggest plan. That's the biggest thing to success. And they have that for sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with Stafford is health. He's just got to make it through the season, right? And that's, you definitely don't want to see Jimmy Garoppolo play. I mean, not a big fan of that. If I was them, I'm sure they'd much rather have Carson Wentz at this point, who I believe is backing up Patrick Mahomes. But yeah, I think if Stafford can play at least 15 games, they certainly make the playoffs. I actually have them finishing second as well, but this is based off of a tiebreaker. I have them winning 12 games this year. 12 games, and they have the same record, in my opinion, as the 49ers in division, which then it goes to conference record, and I think I have them with one more loss to an NFC team as I went through it. I think the Rams are going to be right there competing all year with the 49ers. It's interesting because I think a lot of people are going to laugh at the beginning because I have them losing week 1 to the Lions, but then I have them running off like 5 straight after that. You look at that schedule, it's very, very manageable early on outside of that one game against the Lions. And even that could be a game that they win. So I have the Rams finishing 12-5. And if they do beat the Lions week 1, watch out because that could be that extra game. And that might be the difference in them winning the division potentially. So they've got a very good team. They have their early bye week, which I'm not a fan of, but I think their schedule is actually very manageable. So finishing second place has its perks. Last year, the 49ers finished first, which means when they go play some of these other divisions, instead of playing the first place team like the 49ers do, they play the second place team, and that's a big, big advantage. So I have them finishing at 12-5, finishing second place based off a tiebreaker with the San Francisco 49ers.
What's interesting is I actually have the Niners finishing 12-5 too. So you have the Niners finishing 12-5. My guess is due to the tiebreaker. Yep. For me, I think LA could either win 11 or 12. I see some of them. Like one of those is a toss up. And that's probably the Miami Dolphins game. I think is a toss up for them, only because I believe it's a Monday night that they're playing Miami on, and Miami's coming. Miami is much better when they're in a closed dome environment. It's interesting. I went to go watch them last year, temperature wise and this is how I knew when I bet on the Chiefs to beat Miami in the playoffs. We were out there in Miami, and it was like 60, maybe 55, 60 degrees. Felt great, like especially when you're from California and it's 95 out here. It felt great. People were sitting next to were shivering. Like, this is freezing cold. This is why we're not playing good. And I'm like, what? This is why you're not playing good? Like, it's just freezing for us. I'm like, bro, freezing cold. They're like, yeah, this is why Tua's not playing good. I was like, all right, well, in a dome, it fixes things. And LA has a dome, so I think it makes the battlefield very even. So I'm excited to see that game.
Yeah, I forget what game it was a couple of years ago. It was 2 years ago. Miami was traveling, and it was like 56 degrees at game time. And Miami brought the portable heaters with them.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Literally brought portable heaters with them because they knew they were going to be cold in 56-degree weather. That's absolutely insane, man. Talk about a team that is built to play in warm weather. And I get it. It's funny I remember when I first moved here, And people that I work with, like I would show up to work in like a t-shirt, and they're like, "Aren't you cold?" I'm like, "Cold? No, dude. Like I moved from Oregon. It's 65 outside. What are you doing?" These guys are wearing like their pea coats and their parkas and all this other stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, now that I've been here for 5 years, I can absolutely tell you that if it gets into the 60s, I'm like, yeah, I'm cold. I feel it. So it does happen. It does happen over time. Your blood thins out, as they say, and you definitely start to feel that weather as soon as it changes. And that's, it's coming from a guy who, like, all year round would be in Oregon. It'd be in the 30s. And I'd be wearing flip flops, basketball shorts, and a thin hoodie over a t-shirt. And that's that was my normal wear when I would go outside. Now it gets into the 60s here, and I'm like, yeah, I need a jacket. So
That's crazy. 50 when it gets 50 here, 60 here, I'm like, I'm enjoying it. It might be a little chilly, but I'm enjoying it because I like to be like comfortable in 90 degrees, man. It's hitting 90 already, and we're not even in the summer yet. So that's crazy. Do you have any games on the Niners schedule that you think is like, oh man, we got them at the wrong time? Like, I know we talk about certain games, for example, having to play LA at the end of the year, having to play Detroit at the end of the year. Do you think that's the wrong time to play those kind of teams where they're their best self, or like, for example, Packers and Buffalo, playing them late cold weather? Is there any games that you can pinpoint where like, I hate that we play them towards the end of the season or due to weather?
yeah, definitely. I mean, Buffalo's like the one that absolutely stands out. Again, Buffalo's coming off a bye. You're playing them in December on the road after playing Green Bay. That's one. I'll tell you another one. You talked about the Bears. I know I'm not really buying their brand, but week 14, I think, is when they play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's essentially you're almost a full season into a rookie year. Like Caleb Williams, week 14, I will imagine, is going to be a way different quarterback than he is weeks 1 through 5. So, that's a team that I would prefer, if I was going to play them, that I would play them earlier in the season. I'll tell you two things that do favor them, though. I love playing the Jets week 1. Love playing the Jets week 1. And I love playing the Cardinals week 18. I mean, if the 49ers are in a must-win situation week 18, playing the Cardinals is about as favorable as it can get in a must-win situation if they're fighting for the number 1 seed. So I think that definitely favors them starting and ending the schedule in that way. I love playing the Jets before the season really starts to get going, and then having the Cardinals as your final game in a situation that might be a must-win situation. Those definitely fall in the favor. Is there anything that stands out to you as you look at the schedule?
I remember I texted in the group chat. I had said, I think the Bears is one of those ones where it's like, dang, that one sticks out because, like I said, you're gonna have their 3 receivers are really good. There's gonna be a mismatch somewhere, whether that's Bernardo Green, Demo, or Mooney. There's a mismatch whenever Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze are on the field. I think that's just a great receiving core there. So that could be a little toss up, I guess, or well, not necessarily a toss up, but the unexpected, right? Like you don't know what you're gonna get from them. So that's a game where before season starts, before we get to see Caleb Williams play, I'm like, maybe. I don't like having to go to Miami late in the year because Miami's a good team, man. I think Mike McDaniels is a really good coach, and having to play Detroit and LA towards the end of the year are probably my worst games on the schedule because they are going to be tighter. Luckily, they're home games, but man, that's a rough time to have to play them in must-win games.
Yeah, Miami, I think it's interesting. Traveling that late in the season is always a little bit tougher. Tua sucks, dude. I don't know how else to say it. I try to be nice, but Tua's not a good quarterback at all. And you talk about a guy that, like, statistically checks all the boxes. I mean, if you're making arguments based off of statistics, then Tua's a top 5 quarterback. But if you watch Tua, he's probably not top 15. I mean, I think I would probably no, I guarantee I can name 15 quarterbacks I would comfortably take over Tua. He's just not very good, man. He's not in big game moments. He always shrivels. His arm is super weak. I don't trust Tua at all. I don't. And it's funny because I feel like the only people that really believe in Tua is like 60% of the Dolphins fan base. Like, I know that they're at war right now where there's a big chunk of that fan base that doesn't want to pay Tua. There's 60% or so that loves Tua. They call themselves the Tuanons. Good luck with that, man. Absolutely not. Tua is not a good quarterback. I can't pick the 49ers to lose to the Miami Dolphins. I just can't.
What's crazy is my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, they're Dolphins fans, and my father-in-law is kind of like more so like, I don't really believe in Tua. Brother-in-law is like, I think Tua's good. I personally, I've always compared Tua since he's been the Dolphins quarterback to Jimmy G. Like, that's what you're getting, a not a strong arm quarterback, a quarterback that's going to get panicked. Like, I don't know. Like, for me, it's more so just having to travel late in the year than anything. And
for sure, I agree. No, I agree with that. And Miami at home is certainly, that's a different game for sure. That's probably going to be a game that they're going to need to win to even sniff the playoffs. So I can understand your sentiment. I agree with that. It's Tua. Like, I don't know. Like, people talk about Geno Smith, and I understand that a little bit, but the way that people look at Geno is also how I look at Tua. I just don't think he's good, man. I really don't. So I don't know. Dazza says 3 teams from the NFC North could make the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, possible. It is possible. It's not likely, but it is possible. I mean, I guess, it's funny too. I mean, talking about a team that made the playoffs last year, Miami made the playoffs. I could see them not making the playoffs.
And they're in a rebuild. They're low key in a rebuild mode. That's two defensive ends coming out with big injuries. That's
yeah,
that works.
Gabe says, Jesse, you talk about the Niners like they're a physical team. They are finesse. That's why everyone runs on them. They have too many divas now. This is an interesting comment, Gabe, because I think that the perception of the 49ers is they are a physical team. And I think that there's still some physicality. Like Miami, when I look at Miami, they're a true finesse team. Weather-wise, everything, you look at that. Their quarterback, I look at Brock Purdy, and one thing that you're not going to say about Brock Purdy and get away with is that he's not like tough as nails and gritty and all those things. Tua is like the exact opposite of that. So when I look at Miami, they're super finesse. I think the 49ers, compared to what they were, certainly are much more finesse. I mean, 2019, you looked at that team, you look at that defensive line especially, teams feared the 49ers. They're looking at giants staring across from them. 49ers looked physically different than most teams that they played. And that was apparent as soon as they came onto the field. Last year, when I attended those games, I didn't look at them and go, oh my gosh, the 49ers just physically look different than these teams. That's no longer the case. So I don't know that they're finesse, so to speak, but they're certainly not the team that was physically imposing just a few short years ago. What do you think about this one, Marco?
No, yeah, I think the Niners are more of a finesse team than they are a physical team. And it's in the sense of the way their offense is being ran a little bit, in terms of it's more so on first downs. Like Kyle's trying to beat teams that they're stacking the box, where it's more like, you know what, hey, I'm going to beat you over the top, because he understands that's the time he needs to throw the ball to be efficient. Defensively, I think they're more of a finesse team. And I want to say finesse team defensively. Kind of, there's kind of like what he's offensively, they're finesse. Defensively, I think they're a physical team. I think Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, the D-line is physical. Demo brings a physicality that hasn't been had in the secondary since Deshaun Golson, that I could remember, as Dante Hittner, that I could remember. So there's a physicality that the Niners have. It's more so the defensive line isn't a physical D-line anymore. And when you're missing guys like Buckner, Armstead not being there, that's where I think is the bigger issue. Not necessarily the Niners being finesse, because if we allow Kyle to run the ball 50 times, he's running the ball 50 times and running it down your throat and laughing at you because you can't stop the run. That's what a physical team does. That's why they don't care to have a right tackle that could pass block, and they'd rather have someone who could be a good run blocker, even though Colt McKivitz isn't. Their biggest thing is to run the ball and try to be physical. But I would say the offense is a little more finesse with Purdy behind there.
Yeah, absolutely. Level 7 says the entire Mel is different. Underrated Cardinals offense: Connor, Benson, Carter, Kyler, Marvin Harrison, Zay Jones, Mike Dortch, and a solid O line. Listen, the Cardinals are better, right? And it's kind of the same thing that I said about Brock Purdy, where I could see him statistically declining, but he's a better quarterback this year because statistics don't tell you everything. Even if the Cardinals win 6 games, I think they're going to be very competitive, and I think they're going to clearly be a better team. I just think they're a year away. I like what they're building. I like the foundation they have, but they just need to have another year of talent brought in through free agency, through the draft. So if I'm a Cardinals fan, and you guys are, you're very, very excited. Sounds like you're selling out that stadium for the first time in a long time. You should be excited about that. And I think that Kyler Murray with Marvin Harrison, if Kyler can get back to his form or even a little bit better, maybe play a little bit more under control at times with Marvin Harrison, that can be a scary proposition for many, many years to come. But they need a year before I'm fully confident in that team. But I do think that they are better than what they were last year, even if the record doesn't necessarily display that. So,
No, I think AZ is going to be competitive. There's a difference between being competitive but being good. Like, they're going to be in a lot of games. That doesn't mean they're going to be winning these games because their defense isn't what it needs to be yet. Offensive wise, I think their offense will put up points. Kyler's a good quarterback. They have a good running game, good receivers. I just don't think their defense is there yet. They're on their way. They're not there yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Regime says, I like this channel. I tuned in after the Super Bowl and I really liked your takes as a Chiefs fan. You know, it's funny you say that, Regime, because you go look at that video, and I've had some videos do, clear 20,000 or what have you. That video went crazy. And what's interesting about that post-game video is it blew up 6 weeks after the Super Bowl. I had like something like 20 something thousand views, like 22,000 views. 6 weeks after the Super Bowl, for about an 8-week stretch, I picked up like another 40,000 views on that thing. And I think it's because of the reaction in the beginning and just how devastated I was that the 49ers lost the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure Chiefs fans were like, hey, you got to check this out. This Niner guy just like is basically crying on camera. You know what I mean?
They're just laughing at you.
Yeah. I'm sure they're like, check this out. Check this one out. So I'm sure that's where it came from. I appreciate your Regime. I'm sure that's where you came from as well. That's where you saw it. But either way, man, appreciate you being here and showing love. I don't know. I guess my biggest thing, it's funny because what you'll notice, Regime, is throughout, if you're here for a lot of these shows, a lot of 49er fans are frustrated with me, and a lot of other teams fans love my take and they feel like I'm very level-headed and fair. And 49er fans think that I just like hate on the 49ers because I think that I am kind of level-headed and fair and look at it from other aspects of other teams. And I just try to keep it real and honest and give you my actual opinions. And sometimes that goes against my fandom, and what my fandom wants and what I actually think are two different things. And so there's this interesting dichotomy that I notice with people that watch the channel. So Gabe says, Jesse, I appreciate your opinion. Your heart is always for your team, but you always stay grounded to the truth and are not afraid to take off the rose-colored glasses. I'll tell you, it's hard to do that sometimes. It's very hard to do that as a fan. And you'll definitely see those reactions happening post-game. For the few times that I actually stream during the game, you'll see me go in full fan mode. But you have to be objective if you're gonna, in my opinion, if you're gonna have a channel, and being objective is a must. But sometimes it's perceived as hate. So what are you gonna do? Marco, you kind of run into the same thing. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you just hate the 49ers.
It's like, it's man, I'm not gonna. There's, like I tell people, man, there's two different things. Like, if I'm gonna have a sports conversation, fandom's out the door. Like, we're gonna have a true conversation about the sport or each team. But like, if you're gonna argue, it's like you and I were talking about it the other day. Like, it's like that big brother mentality, right? Like, if someone talks about the Niners, oh, it's always game on. Like, only I could talk about them in that way. So for me, it's more so like critical criticism, not necessarily hate. I just think the fans want everything to be roses, and it's not that way. And I understand it's not going to be that way. But definitely let a Seattle fan or another team's fan come and try to say the Niners aren't great or the Niners aren't good or to talk down on Brock Purdy. And I'm like, hold up, like only I could say Brock Purdy isn't that great. All right,
It's so
you can't
funny.
do
It's
that.
like that big brother
Like,
thing, right? Like if you're
yeah,
anybody that's a big brother or a big sister, you know what we're talking about here, where you can say whatever you want about your little brother or your little sister, but the moment that somebody else comes in and says the same things you say, you're like, excuse me. All of a sudden you turn into a bouncer and you're like stopping them from saying whatever and you're protecting your little brother or little sister. That's exactly what I do with Brock. It's like I say what I say about Brock and I give my opinions, but the moment that another fan base is like, yeah, Brock, blah, blah, I'm like, all right, chill. Like, let's talk about your quarterback situation for a minute before we go crazy over what Brock Purdy is or is not. So it's pretty funny how that happens.
It's like all these Raider fans talk about Brock. Like, bro, your quarterback was Jimmy G last year. Aiden O'Connell, dude looks like a super trooper. Come on now. Like, he's not that good. Let's be real. Like, let's have conversation. Because if you want to attack my quarterback, your quarterbacks have sucked for the last who knows how many years. Like, since Derek Carr even sucked. Like, let's be real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure, bro. I'd never claimed to be a journalist. I don't want to be a journalist because if I'm a journalist, then that means that I probably am going to be in a situation where I have to be in the 49ers back pocket at some point. And I really don't want to be conflicted. So
And that's
it's
why
much easier
I
to be
only
on
do
this side.
credentialed. That's why I'm only credentialed college because I don't mind going to a college stadium or a college coach and telling them, hey, are you expected to be fired this week? Like, completely different than going to the 49ers and having to have that hard conversation, or for example, them telling you, hey, you can't post this or it has to be certain ways. And I've had it with the college facilities too, where they're like, hey, you can't have that. You got to take that down. It's like, I don't care what you say. Like,
yeah. And the other thing too is like, I never claimed to be anything other than that. You know what I mean? I'm a fan of the team and I just give my opinion. I'm no different than anybody else. I just have the guts to turn on the camera and put my opinions out there for everybody to criticize. Right. I think there's a lot of really, really smart people that come through these chats, offer opposing opinions. Every time I do a call-in show, I love that people will come at me sometimes with an opposing opinion. We have good conversation. And that's just what it is. I mean, that's what sports is all about. It's about debate. It's about, giving your opinion. And whether you're right or wrong, it's more about being able to defend your opinion. And the other thing too is, bro, I'm not I don't rely on this. I've said this a million times too. Like, this is not how I make my money. So I'm here giving my real opinions. People are like, oh, it's clickbait and this and that. It's like, no, dude, I don't rely on any of this for my financial income and how I feed my family. I don't need any of this. And that's the other thing. A lot of people do rely on this to pay their bills. And you can look at that however you want, but this is their career. And I think it would be awesome to get there at some point. Don't get me wrong. If I was making enough money to where I could do this full time, that would be awesome. But if I don't make a dime from this, my life doesn't change at all. Like, I have zero change in my life. This is not how I pay my bills. So I'm truly doing this like for the love of the game, as they would say, right? Like, I don't need any money from this. So there's no reason for me to like go out and like try to have these crazy takes and to pull people in, because I don't need it at the end of the day. I'm just giving my real opinion, and some people like it, some people don't, and that's fine. I mean, nobody's twisting your arm to be here, brother. I mean, you can go. It's fine. Roger says Stafford over Purdy. Nah, but for real, fair takes makes me tune in as a Rams fan. I think the full-blown ish talking should be during game weeks and game days. Yeah, that's the other thing too. For those of you that haven't been around for a long time, Behind Enemy Lines. That's like my favorite show every week, where I bring on a content creator from another team, and we have very respectful conversation. And hopefully everybody in the chat gets really educated on the upcoming opponent. That is like my favorite show every single week. I look so forward to that one during the season, and it's always always good chatter. We don't talk a lot of trash. We do make some fun bets from time to time, though. We do make some fun bets. So, Marco, brother, what do you got going on the rest of the week? You got anything coming up?
I'm gonna be on tomorrow morning at 9 with Ryan G. Hensley. And then I'm gonna be on later in the day with Ashley Ariana. So I'll do those two, and then freaking I didn't know Rohan is part of the Cabo clique, man. He's over there hanging out in Cabo or Cancun or something like that. You're supposed to record yesterday, and I texted him. He's like, I'm actually in Cabo. I'm like, oh, cool, hanging out with Kyle Shanahan, I see, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fun. Yeah. Listen, he's compromised now. So I can't take anything he says seriously. Sorry, Rohan. No. That's awesome, man. Make sure you tune in over at Clutch Gene Sports. That's Marco's channel. Show him some love. He'll be on twice tomorrow, it sounds like. Dang, that's a gauntlet. And if you are here, appreciate you. Much love. Appreciate you guys for always contributing to the show one way or another. And until next time, peace. Have a great weekend, y'all.